Amnesty International says it's unsurprising the decision was taken. It believes this is due to South Africa's display of commitment to the Rome Statute. Amnesty International says the country should continue to lead in international justice, even where others refuse to do so. All right, we'll get to that bite in a bit. Now, of course, today a watershed moment for the deaf community has been marked, and President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed the South African Sign Language Bill into law a little bit earlier today. And this makes sign language the country's 12th official language. And earlier in the year, the National Assembly approved that Section 6 of the Constitution be amended. And we have our reporter on the scene, Moloko Moloto, who was there throughout the proceedings and developments. Moloko, good afternoon to you, and thank you so much for joining us. Of course, the President emphasizing the importance of inclusion of all communities, even those that are marginalized or differently abled.
That is very true, Cindy Mabi. A very special occasion, not only for the deaf community, but for the people of South Africa at large. South Africa now has the 12th official language, sign language, which is being spoken. Even before this signing of the bill by the President, which is now an act of parliament, there has been people in South Africa who were speaking this particular language. And of course, it was recognized by the Constitution, but not officially as an official language. Maybe let's speak to the custodian of languages, the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture, Zizi Godwa. He joins me now. Minister, thank you so much for your time. A very special moment for not only the deaf community, but the fact that now South Africans officially have an opportunity to learn a new language.
It's quite exciting. I mean, what a befitting way to commemorate and celebrate the 105th birthday of Tata Mandela, because as we celebrate the values of President Mandela, the significance about this is signed in public, like the Constitution in 1996. And there's a significance about it, because it has two elements in those two pieces of legislation. One is about human rights, promotion of human rights, as well as dignity. And therefore, for the President to have taken this decision, that you cannot build a community or build a nation when you have a section of community that does not feel included in that nation. So I think we're completing the charter of a nation of our dream, an all-inclusive society that when we say South Africa belongs to all live in it, we are today significantly putting an effect to that. So we're quite happy from the point of view, as you know, we're responsible for language policy as a department. The PEN, South African Language Board, has been driving this process. It took so long, and we're happy that at least we're where we are today. We're celebrating who we are as South Africans.
The signing of a law, of a bill into a law, Minister, is one thing. It is the practical part of it that is going to be a challenge. When you talk of services that the deaf community must access, hospitals, clinics, even courts, they still do not have that free or direct access because of these impediments when it comes to language. How is government going to be leading in that particular regard?
There are a number of entities, including the entity under our department, which is the PEN South African Language Board, has already had workshops with a number of departments, for example, which have already started to implement this act which the President signed into law today. The Department of Basic Education. There are educators who are already undergoing a lot of training. This will mean an overhaul in terms of our social life, because language is not just a form of communication, it's about social inclusion, it's about participation. So the whole sector of the economy has to adopt and internalize the fact that we've got a 12th language. For an example, the basic frontline services must internalize this law. It's not about only the public sector. We want to see in the private sector. When we're talking about the sectors of our economy, for example, we want to see that in the newsroom, in the eNCA, we want to see effectively how you're going to incorporate and make sure that you internalize this law into practice. And I think that it's one step we recognize that indeed we cannot have one section of our community historically that has been excluded. And I think today we're putting an end to that through this law.
I heard the President saying that government will try to build more special schools for the deaf community. But to the general public, how do you think they should be embracing this, considering the fact that already we have 11 other official languages, and many of us really know our mother tongue and just perhaps English as it happens to be a medium of instructions in many instances. How are you as the department, going to be conscientizing South Africans across the board to say, if you learn a sign language, at least you are able to break all the other barriers? If you and I can be able to speak in sign language, we don't need perhaps an interpreter to even come and assist you.
Many of us, Moloko, you know that we did not have any privilege to understand, we did not like Afrikaans. But we understood that Afrikaans is but one of the languages. We did not go to school to learn Afrikaans because we understood the barriers of language and to make sure that we communicate as South Africans. That language is about identity. But more than any identity is about social inclusion. We will learn, South Africans, this is not the first time we hear about sign language. As you know, in the past, there were many instances, services of sign language provided in many public events of government. We have to make an effort, not only exclusive facilities, but make sure that it's part of integrated education system, so that those who come from, we know that they do their best to learn about this 12th language.
All right. Minister Zizi Godwa is the Minister of Sport, Arts and Culture. Essentially, he is the custodian of languages in our country. And of course, the people who, as of today, will now be able to benefit are those who will now be able to say there's a law that compels you to provide this or that service in the language that I understand fully. And I think going forward, really, it's going to depend on whether, as ordinary South Africans, we embrace this language. I'm not too sure. I'm looking for somebody that I can speak to from the deaf community. If perhaps my colleagues can be able, please come closer, and you as an interpreter, sir, so that we can also hear from the sector. Thank you so much, sir. Welcome. I appreciate. Maybe just tell the people your name and where you are from.
Well, my name is Mosala. My surname is Maketa. So I'm from South African National Deaf Association, SANDRA for short.
All right. Tell us perhaps your reaction to the fact that now this is a law. What does it mean even going forward for you as the community?
Today just marks an historical moment. Today, sign language has finally been officialized. It's been signed. So what does that mean going forward? There's more opportunities that are open for us, the deaf community. Plus the community at large, they definitely can enjoy the many opportunities that the country offers. The access to education, the access to court, the justice system, to everything. We now have the ability to access the same because of the fact that it was signed into Parliament. It's such a relieving moment. So thank you so much to the deaf community. We're so grateful to PANCEL, forward to LLB, to all the communities and organization. We're honestly grateful to all of them. So thank you. And also the hearing community is also involved. They're also very excited now, looking forward to learning sign language. You're definitely welcome to learn sign language with us. So, and to be involved in the deaf community is such an awesome perspective.
Lastly, there has always been a complaint that deaf people do not have access to certain services. For instance, when you go to hospital, there is likely to be no one to assist you, to clinics and other government services. Are you confident that from now going forward, perhaps the South African public servants would take this seriously to a point that the people from your community will be able to access these services?
Yes, definitely. I'm hoping and have faith towards that, because we working with various deaf organizations that at the moment, and looking at what the community needs. How can we educate the community to be able to learn to give access to deaf people? Because most of them don't know. When a deaf person comes through, they get, as you explained with the hospitals, deaf people have had barriers to go through such systems because they have no knowledge. So it's our responsibility to make sure to teach them and help them to be able to assist deaf people to gain access. So we also asking the government to also support us, to support in terms of financial means, fiscal ways, to assist in making the community and organizations that are that will be involved in helping grant access to deaf people, to give them a budget to work with it, technology, we have Viacom as well, one of the technologies video means to be able to communicate, to have an interpreter on video and be able to interpret to a deaf person if that government owns.
All right, just a quick one. Is sign language really not a difficult language? And how long do you think it would take for an average person like me to learn it?
It's very easy. It's actually very easy. If you have a passion for it, if you have a passion, you can learn. It's very easy. You can learn. What's learning is you can start with the basics, and also as a hearing person yourself, you know sign language. Actually, you as a hearing person, you do know. For example, how do people communicate in soccer? See, that's how they can communicate. When a person's far, they know, basic sign language. So that means when you actually want to learn the full language, you will be able to adapt to it easily. So it's possible. It's simple. It's doable.
All right. No, thank you very much for your time. The sector certainly appreciating the fact or the efforts that have been made, at least from government's point of view. I understand that the National Assembly, when it voted or approved this bill in May this year, there was no opposition, none whatsoever. So there is that general agreement that sign language indeed ought to be the 12th language in South Africa.
And Moloko, I think the opportunity is that we are now embracing the deaf community as a wider community of South Africans under the national umbrella, that no one should be left out, especially disenfranchised communities. And in the words of Mandela, who had said, and I paraphrase, that when you speak to somebody in their own language, you really you tug at their heartstrings. You are humbling yourself enough to say, I want to learn you, learn your language, understand you better, so we can then form this unity in diversity. It really is quite a landmark development.
No, indeed. I mean, isn't this interesting, the fact that the president is signing this into law just a day after the birthday, or what would have been the birthday of the founding president of the democratic South Africa, Nelson Mandela. And I suppose, Cindy, many of us are learning foreign languages. I mean, there would be people who would learn French, they would learn Portuguese. I mean, even the language you and I are communicating, English, is foreign. And we also have languages internally here in South Africa, indigenous languages, that perhaps this is a challenge for us to say, if it is difficult to learn all these many languages, at least let us make an effort to learn one language that may be universal, that you know for a fact that you would be able to speak in any part of the world, whether you are in the East or in the West or anywhere across the African continent. At least in that way, there is hope that we will be bridging that particular gap. But of course, I suppose this is also a challenge for the Basic Education Department to introduce sign language. They possibly will say it is there at this point in time, but also to make sure that they popularize it and make it fashionable even for the youngster. I would even personally say perhaps it should be made compulsory in schools.
Moloko, just before we let you go, the excitement that we saw with Mr. President as we're learning to sign at least 2 or 3 sentences. Again, this is a visual language, so you can't learn it from a book, as one of the speakers was saying. So you compelled to practice and interact with the deaf community for that sense of inclusion as well as a nation.
Well, indeed, I suppose, as they say, practice makes perfect. I just think each one of us should make an effort and make sure that we reach out to those who know the language. And I'm sure you would see, for instance, even during government events, government at least make sure that during such official events there is somebody who's standing next to the president who will be interpreting that. And television stations are increasingly also utilizing the services of sign language interpreters. But ultimately, I suppose it will all come to us as individuals, the effort that we will be making. And those who perhaps are not encountering these barriers may not see the importance of that. But I suppose if we can understand that there are people who may not even have access to information, all because they are not part of the whole conversation, if we start from there, I suppose that we will be able to get somewhere.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you indeed. That's Moloko Moloto reporting there from the Union Buildings as the president signed into law the 12th official language being sign language. And again, we encourage the communities involved where there is an opportunity to really, not at a superficial level, but heart to heart, to make our concerted effort to learn sign language where it is possible. But still to come here on